Damn it, now I can't blame Vince for last time.
You're on, David.
Hello and welcome to the last social media power talk of the series. We live in a social media marketing environment, and there are many questions within that always challenge us. The most critical one of late has been influencer marketing. Is it the shortcut that we think it is? Is it the con that some people suggest it is? Is it manipulative? How real can it be? These are all questions which impact upon what we do in this sphere, and unpacking all that today, we have with us a man who's co-authored a book on influence marketing, a consultant, a marketer, and an all-rounded human being, Danny Brown. Danny, welcome.
Thanks, David, and I'm not sure what to expect for this. Now you tell me it's the last one for this season, so or this series, so no pressure then, huh?
Absolutely none whatsoever.
Why can't you have like Vincent be the last person, so we could have egged him on in a bit, you know?
Well, I think he was planning. That was a plan eventually, but he set you up. You know that.
Yeah, sounds about right.
Okay, and starting with that, Danny. I mean, I've known you for quite a long time through your writing and the stuff which you post online. But it's only recently that you've come back into Google+. So tell us a little bit about your journey as a marketer.
Yeah, I mean, my background's in corporate communications. I started back in the UK many years ago with British Telecom. I was BT Mobile then, so it was kind of like what O2 morphed into, like one of the first cell providers. So part of my job was working with B2B, so soccer clubs, organizations, and introducing data plans, which was just coming on the scene at the time. From there, I went to FedEx, did more corporate communications and more corporate marketing there. And then I met my wife, who's Canadian, which led me to coming to Canada and starting my own consultancy while I went through the whole paperwork and permanent residency, etc.
Awesome. So it's one of these grand plans, right?
Yeah, right. You go to work in the UK and you marry a Canadian. So yeah, so doesn't everybody do that?
Absolutely. All right. With that, let's begin with the burning question, really. Give us your perspective on influencer marketing first. Well, how do you see it?
I think, and I'm loath to say this, but I think Vincent Messina summed it up properly or succinctly with a little quote he put on one of the updates, from the show today about the difference is in the R, the extra R. Influencer marketing, there's no such thing. That's a personal opinion, obviously. Influence marketing minus the R, huge difference, and an actual business metric and a business, solution. Influencer, it's more for me ego and hey, what can I get from brands?
Okay, and I'm glad you brought this up, and I'm going to add a little bit of personal perspective here, because obviously you must share the same. When you actually go into large companies and you talk to the social media teams, inevitably the social media influencer marketing strategy plan gets rolled out.
Oh yeah.
So why do you think there is such persistence in this? And it could be a myth, as you say.
Yeah, it's laziness, I think, in a lot of parts. People hear about, not so much now, obviously Clout and Cred and Peer Index and the likes of the social scoring platforms have pretty much gone the way of the dodo, which I love. That's great to see. It shows that businesses are taking more accountability to business goals and sales goals when it comes to influence programs. But I think it's always been the case, and even social media to a degree. It's seen as a golden nugget with little input. It's free, it's wide scale, you can get a lot of amplification, for very little input, or believed to be very little input. We know differently, obviously. And I just think that because people see, huge numbers, that Clout in its heyday had 500 million scored profiles, 1.5 million Clout perks, that kind of stuff, and they see these numbers, they think, I want to be a part of that, I want to get my brand in part of that. And it comes back to laziness and quick fix, because there's so much pressure on now as well. I think social's exacerbated it a little bit, where we we expect quick results, and it doesn't happen, not for longevity, not for long tail, success. It doesn't happen that way. So I think that comes down to why influencer marketing programs always get rolled out when a campaign comes up.
Okay, I mean, essentially you're describing human economic behavior arguably at its worst and the way it impacts on marketing. So tell us a little bit about influence marketing now, because obviously that is different, right?
Yeah, I mean, influence marketing, and I co-wrote a book about it, but even Sam and I weren't keen on using, say, social media or classing it as a social media book or even influence itself, because it's just another cog in the big marketing wheel. That's all influence is, like content marketing, like PPC, like SEO, inbound marketing, which is kind of content. So even using the word influence is kind of, you need something to describe it and make brands comfortable with. But it's marketing at the end of the day. It's understanding your customers, what their goals are, where they are in the buying cycle, and what impacts their decisions at that time. And it could be a person, it could be a brand, it could be a publication. That's why I don't like the influencer point, because that takes it to one person who's this social media rock star. Influence is a medium, and it can be anything that impacts that person's decision at a given point in the purchase life cycle. And that's for me the big difference for brands especially.
Okay, I mean, essentially, I mean, what you're talking about here are very human qualities, really. And we've always talked about them in marketing. They haven't changed. If we go back to the medieval way of selling turnips in the marketplace, you needed that kind of psychological impact to essentially create a relationship with your market and move on. And yet, we seem constantly to need refreshing on this. We seem constantly to need reinforcing on what really matters. Every time we have a new tool, we focus on within inverted commas, within the new shiny. And we seem to forget what we knew. Why?
I'm probably going to repeat myself a few times today, and I apologize if I do, but I do strongly believe that laziness, it's a combination. Laziness from the brand point of view, and I mentioned ego from the influencer's point of view earlier. Ego also plays into the consumer's point of view. We love to be told that we are important, and we should be. We are essentially the lifeblood of the brand, or one of the core lifebloods of the brand. But we like to be told the customer's always right. We're going to give you this. If you're unhappy, we'll do X. We're going to design this particular bike for your needs, that kind of stuff. And we get into the mindset that we become the most important people, that all our needs need to be met, and if we're a brand, we need to meet these needs, and that kind of meets in the middle, where we lose the fact that it's not about what our needs are, it's what makes our lives easier, which I guess is a need of ours, but it's not. Making my life easier, for example, might mean my wife has less stress in her life. It might mean my kids have clothes to wear for school. That's not to do with me personally. That's making other people happy that are immediately important to me. So it's taking me out of the equation of being important and actually understanding what's important to make me happy. And what makes me happy is that a brand understands, hey, if you come into our store, we'll get your kids kitted out for 20% less, for example. And I think I went off a tangent there, which I apologize about.
Okay, no problem. That's fine. And I think, the way you explain this leads naturally to the second question I have for you, which is, what role does the human psyche play on influence and influencer marketing? And you sort of covered this in terms of the laziness factor. So I have a question which is a follow-up on this. Now, within a social media sphere, the constant engagement, constant interaction, constant always-on sort of connection tends to amplify both our best and worst points. And with influencer marketing, we do appear to be pandering to the ego trip of the individual. How do we get around that? How do we actually foster a real connection based on real values and develop a relationship which is more authentic?
That's the million-dollar question, I think, that all brands want to answer or have the answer to. I mean, from a brand point of view, it comes down to, okay, and there's a ton of examples. I mean, I go back to Clout, for example. Clout always had a bunch of case studies up on their website that showed how effective Clout was and why brands should pay to use Clout. And it didn't matter about how effective they were at connecting on a one-to-one basis, with their target audience, they had these numbers up. The problem was that the numbers didn't add up. You had Chevy did a campaign a few years back where they had 16,000 positive mentions. They gave Chevy Bolts, I think it was, they gave it to 130, 140 influencers to test drive. These influencers had no relevance to the people that were actually going to buy Chevy Bolts. They were just, making noise, like you say, and really just blasting out this message. One Chevy Bolt got sold, $13,500 for how much would that campaign cost? A clout perk at the time cost $25K to buy into. That's for the smallest clout perk to give away a Sharpie. So you can imagine what test drives on a car would equal to 140 influencers. So brands that want to really connect on a relationship level with their customer, and it doesn't have to be touchy-feely, it doesn't have to be like, hey, let's give each other a hug, but just understand what the customer's actually needing. Tie that to business results. If you're not getting results from a cloud campaign when it was going, a blogger outreach campaign, PPC, SEM, social Facebook ads, anything that you're using to connect and try meet in the middle with your customers' goals, if it's not working, that should tell you your message is wrong, you're not connecting with the customer. Why are you not connecting? Why are you not, doing debriefs to find out why that never happened? From our own point of view, I think there's a lot of pushback now, David, about the amount of noise that's on there. You see bloggers, I had a conversation with David Kuchar, Amy Vernon, and Tanya Rice a couple of weeks back about the return to pure blogging, where people were moving away from the BuzzFeed economy. They're moving away from, Huffington Post just chucking any old crap up there for eyeballs, and they're going back to real content that connects to their basic needs, if that's a business need, if it's a personal need, if it's a pet need, for example. And I think we're seeing that now. We're starting to actually see pushback against the noise that's there, and it's why Twitter's reporting poor ad revenue for the last quarter. They were expecting more. It's really poor. It's why Facebook are pushing video ads as a revenue driver, but they class a video view as 3 seconds versus YouTube at 30 seconds. And that kind of noise, people are starting to push back on and understand it's not what we need and what we're after.
That's quite interesting, really, because it ties back to many of the things we've covered throughout the SMT Power Talk series, particularly when it comes to actually looking not at volume, but at a very targeted connection with your public and your audience, which leads to real conversions. Before we go on to the next question, I think we have a comment from the stream. Alex?
We do, and of course it's from Vin. Of course it's from Vin. Before this comment, he has dropped in a number of jokes, not going to lie. One of them was, do HOAs have Google Translate in them?
I wish I did a month ago.
But back to this comment, it's referencing your book, Danny, and Vin writes, the key is that the customer is still the center of the universe versus the person of influence. As a starting point, you work your way back to the source of influence versus starting with the influencer and targeting the customer.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, and it's obviously I completely agree. It's a kind of a quote from the books. I'd be pretty dumb if I never agreed with it. But yeah,
that would be quite interesting, right?
yeah, it was ghostwritten by one of Guy Kawasaki's minions or something. I don't know. No, it's but it's true, and that it goes back to your point perfectly, David, about the relationship and understanding, at what point does the noise just get switched off? And we shared a bunch of case studies in the book. The whole first chapter was a case study in itself about one of our clients, and it all ties back to it has to be the customer that's at the center of whatever you're doing from a marketing point of view, and you track back the way. And depending on where they are in the life cycle, the purchase life cycle of intent to buy, awareness, research, confirmation, validation, and then the after sales questions about, did I make the right decision? Did I actually need this? And that's when you start to talk about cognitive dissonance, and that really starts to open a whole new level of questions. But it's true. It's like, who is that person? And obviously you can't get down to the granular nitty-gritty level of one person for every single campaign, but you build a very strong persona about this group of people you're going after, and you identify who do they go to for research. Is it Google? Is it Facebook? Is it friends on community networks? Is it Google Plus? Who do they go to for confirmation that this is the right product? If it's a phone, if it's a business phone, they go to their work colleagues. If it's a home phone, they go to their wife to make sure they're getting a family plan, that kind of stuff. So you go through this little path and this little journey, and you start to understand what impacts that at any given time, and then that's when you can start to really get creative with how you're approaching these influence mediums for that persona that you're trying to reach. So it has to be the customer for sure.
That's interesting. And let me throw something else here in terms of questions, which I would like you to sort of cover. And you bring a very multicultural experience to the art of marketing because of your background. You came from the UK, where things up to a certain extent were done differently. You're in Canada, where the global aspect of it, again, approaches things differently. Do you think there is still a culture divide between, let's say, marketing in the UK and marketing in the US or Canada?
Yeah, it's. I actually spoke with one of my friends last year, middle of last year. We had a sort of back and forth little mini blog series about the cultural divide between the UK and North America, and it was still a very big difference. North America seems to care less, and I could be wrong, but from what we found we did a bunch of research on our own blogs, like we did forums, wikis, and we got a whole bunch of people to drop their answers in, and we tended to find that North America wasn't quite as aggressive as the UK, even though the UK was a little bit more mediated because of the ASA. I know you've got the FTC in the US, but I find that the FTC is kind of toothless when it comes to actually implementing what they say they're going to do. The Advertising Standards Agency in the UK, very different kettle of fish. So I do find that there's a difference in aggression. But there's also a difference in what is seen as valuable. North American, long-term value, customer loyalty, good service, great after sales, that's very important. We found that was very important. In the UK, not so much. Bargain bin basements, stack them high, sell them cheap mindset that was there in the 50s and 60s are still there now, 5 years, 50 years later or whatever, and people just want to go to the Woolworths, if that's still around, or their Tesco and buy cheap stuff that they can just replace if they need it, because they don't really care about having long-term loyalty or advocacy. So from that point of view, relationship marketing, if you want to say that, was much more important to North American consumers and brands versus UK brands and consumers who were just really about, okay, what does it do for me now? I don't really care what it does for me in 10 years' time. What does it do for me now? So yeah, I think there's still, it's getting a bit closer, I think, but there's still a bit of cultural divide there, I think.
Why do you think that is? Is it, because it obviously comes down to particular demographic needs of their customers or their customer bases, and they have to be influenced by, ethnicity, the culture around them, essentially.
Yeah, and I think, obviously the UK's got a longer history, if you like, than America and Canada especially. So they've had more time to get stuck in their ways, if you like. I find the UK is a very industrial country. It came from the Industrial Revolution. That was the big core, change when it comes to the UK. Whereas North America is more technology-led. So the UK, unless you go to big cities like London, Manchester, Birmingham, Edinburgh, it's still very much as a strong working man's country where you work 9 to 5, if you're lucky, sometimes very often longer. Monday, Friday, that's your set. The weekend comes, you go to the pub, you have a few beers with your colleagues or friends or wife or whatever, and you go, to the Sunday market, pick up some deals at the Sunday market. That's pretty much always been the way. You go to the larger cities, it changes a little bit. North America is very much more relaxed. It's more technology driven. It's more about how things can, make our lives easier ongoing. It's why you have, thermostats that are controlled by, the sun as opposed to the wall socket or whatever. It's why you have cars that drive themselves. I can't see a Brit buying a car that drives itself. They just wouldn't trust it. No, they want to be behind the car and tooting their horn and shouting obscenities at babies and trolleys. So it's I think it is. It's definitely a cultural mindset, and it's become ingrained as such a working man's country versus North America, which is the American dream. Is, you know, you can succeed and you don't get toned down for it as much as you do in the UK. I think that's a big difference.
You understand? We don't drive like that in Manchester, right?
Wow.
I'm only kidding.
You say that.
That was a fairly accurate, actually, picture you drew in certain segments of the British market, and I think that's quite telling in itself. Because, which is why I asked you, essentially, because you do have a foot in both camps, and you're relatively impartial about how you see both. Before we go any further, we had a poll which we put up. Alex, have we had any movement in terms of the results?
Not particularly, but I think it would be interesting to hear Danny's opinions about the current results. So we asked people what influencer marketing is, and the majority, 56%, say the best marketing shortcut in social. We have 31% saying a manipulative process that works, and then 13% saying an approach that does not work. This poll a couple of people said that they didn't vote because there were certain parts of each of the answers that they didn't like the word manipulative. Gina Fidel, she was like, I don't really like that word. I remember Vin saying that he didn't vote because he didn't like any of the answers. But what shocks me personally is that the top one right now still is that it's the best marketing shortcut in social.
And does that surprise you, Danny?
No, and it goes back to that man Vincent's point about having the extra R at the end of that word, influence. It's, you know, people look at influencer marketing and they do see it as a shortcut. They see social media as a shortcut. And influence marketing or influencer marketing is very much a shortcut. You get people that have got 100,000 followers on Twitter. You get people with 30,000 blog subscribers. You get them with, you know, 50,000 YouTube subscribers. You bang a message out, and obviously all the 100,000 followers are going to be online at the exact moment that tweet goes out, ready to pounce on that influencer's, you know, world-changing message.
Yeah. I mean, isn't that typical? Because I think what you've just pointed out to here is the flaw in the application of flawed logic, which uses numbers in an unrealistic way. But because they're numbers, they seem to make sense. And then if you add percentages to that, they seem to make sense. And suddenly you have a plan being born, which appears to be solid in terms of how it's laid out, how it's supposed to work. But its very foundation is questionable. And that's the real key of what you're actually pointing out. That, you know, the initial starting point is essentially not where we should be starting at all.
Yeah, and it ties into the numbers. I mean, I'm not a fan of reach as a metric. For me, that's a real hit and hope metric, that you really hope that of the 1,000 followers that you've got on whatever network and whatever followers they have on the network, you're hoping that they're going to see your message at the time you need them to be seen. Which is why I'm still a big fan of email marketing as the key driver when it comes to lead gen online, but you know, that's another conversation for another time. No, it's everybody looks at the numbers. They see 100,000 followers and say, yeah, that we're going to get that reach of that follower is going to be like 3-4 million impressions, and you know, it's awesome numbers, just mind blowing. And then you wonder why you sell one Chevy Bolt after 16,000 positive mentions, because nobody cares, nobody's seeing, and it all comes back to relevance. It's one of the reasons I like Tracker, which is an influence marketing platform over in San Francisco. Their core of being is like reach, resonance, and relevance. That's their 3R approach, and it has to be relevant. I don't care if Rob Scoble talks wonders about how whales can use the new Apple Watch on their dorsal fins to understand where, you know, dolphins are in their native fish, and that's really crap. I don't know where I went with that. Anyway, I don't care about someone like Rob Scoble, who's done a great job at what he does, but he's not relevant to me and my needs when it comes to understanding tech products or wanting to know about tech products. So it doesn't matter if he puts it out and 100,000 people retweet that one tweet. I won't see it. It won't mean anything to me, because the numbers don't matter. What matters is I trust one of my work colleagues to tell me more about why I should go with an Android S6 versus the iPhone 6 Plus or whatever. Numbers are great for charging clients more. Results are better for actually earning that money.
I think that you're again making a very important point, which comes back to what you said earlier, that essentially, when we talk about reach over relevance, we're talking about noise over signal. We're talking about blunt force, brute force, wide spectrum marketing, as opposed to very direct relationship building approach. And it all seems to come down to that. And there's always a question to this, Danny. Obviously, personal marketing works. Creating relevance has to work because it creates a relationship. Relationships work. Why are we so bad at actually doing this? Why are businesses failing at this approach? Why do we constantly mess up and come back to the drawing board?
I just think they forgot what they were like when they started in business life. Apple doesn't start out as the most profitable company in the world. It starts out with two geeks with, pedaling away on their little homemade computer, and 30 years later, their core mantra was obviously to make things that make your life easier when it comes to computers, and just make things that work. That's simple. You start a grocery store because you want to interact with the community and bring the best fruit and veg to your local community. And that grocery store expands to 2, to 5, to 10, then gets bought out by a chain, and all of a sudden you're forgetting what made my grocery store so successful to get bought by the chain. It's the fact that I interacted with people when they came in the door. I know that David likes green bananas that you can let go ripe yourself versus yellow bananas that are already ripe. It's your choice. He knows that about you. And businesses forget understanding the customers, and they get lazy. They don't keep up to date CRMs. They don't understand that John, who's been their customer for 15 years, recently lost his wife. So why would you send out, hey, happy anniversary, your anniversary dinner is on us? Why would you do that? Because you're not keeping tabs on your customers. And if you just keep tabs on your customers, it's pretty straightforward to do. You keep in touch with them and you update your database as you go along. You'll keep that small business mindset, and people talk about having a small business mindset has been a bad thing, and no, a small business mindset means you care about being successful because you care about the end customer or the end employee. And I think that's where a lot of it comes in. They've forgotten what it's like to be hungry and to actually care about the customers.
I wonder if the marketing manager at Tesco is actually listening to you now, because you pretty much outlined their trajectory. They went from a very small concern to a very big concern, and they won out on this relationship building approach, which they then subsequently lost, and then are struggling
right
for that same reason. So I think that's quite a fascinating sort of development, and what you're saying makes absolutely perfect sense. So let me ask about all this now. We live in a world where we have metrics. We have metrics irrespective of what we do, whether we target influencers or target influence. We basically can see everything that's happening. We can analyze it. The moment we can analyze something and see it, we can improve upon it. We can iterate. We can amplify and change and plan and rinse and repeat. How authentic is all that?
It comes down to how well you're using it and actually extrapolating the data that you're after. I mean, you can say, I want 1,000 new signups to my email form for my blog. If I only get 10, it's a failure. Well, it depends how profitable these 10 people are. It depends how much of my white papers they download, how many ebooks they buy, how many social shares or comments they leave. They're now profitable customers to me. I missed out on 900. So what? They were maybe 900. We wouldn't have done anything. So it's real if, and this is going to sound crap, but it's real if you keep it real and if you make it real. If you're only just grabbing numbers for the sake of handing it to your CMO at the end of each month's ELT meeting, then yeah, great. You're not going to understand much. I mean, our mutual friend David Kuchar's an ideal example of getting real data and showing case studies on his own blog, which is what I like about him. He's not fluffing. It's not anecdotal evidence. He's actually showing what his websites are doing for his clients and why they did that. When you get data like that, that's when it's real and that's when it's important and it makes sense. If you get data that says, well, we got 2.5 million impressions, so what? What did that do? We don't know because we weren't tracking the after effect of what happened. So data is only as good as person is, which is why I still think humans are going to need jobs in 10 and 20 years when everybody's talking the robots are going to take over and McDonald's are going to be out of business because there's a robot coming out that can make the perfect burger. People are still going to need data to understand why people need a burger a certain way. If a robot makes it or not, that's a different story.
Great. Alex, have we got any comments along this front as we move forward?
We have a couple of comments talking about Omisido. I think that's how he says his name, right?
It is, yeah.
Okay, good. He mentioned a quote from Christoph Trapp saying, "Content might be king, but distribution is in charge of the day-to-day," which I think is an interesting way to take the conversation. But another question that I've kind of been holding on to is from Janet Fouts, and she asked, Fouts? Did I not say that right?
Oh no, I was reading the question. It just popped up on my screen there. Sorry.
So you see why I was holding on to it. She asked, how should brands keep the relationship alive with the influencer, short of giving them another car? I kind of want to expand this question to not just with influencers, but with an audience, with customers, because I think it's important.
Yeah, and we actually cover that, a little plug for the book, we actually cover that in one of the chapters about the ongoing relationship and why it's key, because influence campaigns, the very word campaign is where a lot of them fall down. They're viewed as short-term buzz, outreaches, where it means that the next time you have a new product or a new launch or a new car, you're going to need a new series of influencers, which costs money, which costs research, which costs time and resources you may not have. Understanding what makes the people tick once they've enjoyed your product or once they've worked with you to deliver the product is key to keeping influencer, for want of a better word, attached to your brand, or a customer attached with your brand. It's all about the after sales. It's all about understanding, okay, if someone, let's say the influencer sold a car, and now the customer is questioning whether they made the right decision purely because they listened to the influencer versus their gut or their heart or their head or whatever. It's up to the brand to work with either that influencer or someone else within that customer circle that can help them, ease their concerns. Could I afford it? Well, you're spending less on X, Y, Z because of insurance savings. You can afford this model of car, for example. But it's also working long term. It's, why do we only think short term when it comes to influence campaigns? Why do we not think of it more like a loyalty program, like a relationship building program where, yes, we'll use influencers that have got thousands and thousands of followers to amplify a message, but then we need to identify the 8-10 people that are really going to impact that customer's decision and work with these guys to continue that journey and make sure that you deliver on the promise. If you say a car is going to be great for your kids because they have 2 video screens in the back, and you deliver a car that's only got 1 video screen, you're going to piss that customer off to start with. You do that, you're immediately on the back foot. It goes back to the Apple thing. Make it work and make people happy. There's no secret sauce to that,
I think that's awesome, because essentially, in order for a relationship to work, they both have to be happy with it, and if they're not, then things begin to go wrong very quickly. Alex, have we got any more comments?
We have this comment from Andy Foote, and maybe it makes more sense to you two. I'm not big on LinkedIn. Curious what Danny, David think about data on the LinkedIn platform starting to get more followers reach as a derivative from LinkedIn Publisher.
Danny, what do you think? I mean, I've got to say that I seriously underuse LinkedIn. I have a presence there and I do publish material there, but it's one of the platforms where I don't concentrate very much because I just don't. I don't have a lot of time, and it's one of the decisions I had to make. And the clients I have who actually do have a LinkedIn presence, they use it primarily for developing B2B relationships, which lead potentially to cooperative ventures or unintentional leads which might come in, but this is not their primary market. However, Danny, do you have a different picture or idea about this?
No, I mean it's very much like Medium. A lot of people like publish on a Medium on top of their own blog, and if it works, I know some people that publish on LinkedIn Publisher, and the guy, Randy Milanovic, I'm not sure if he's watching today, but he shared a post recently about how he got a lot of traffic from LinkedIn Publisher, and if it works and you're happy to not concentrate primarily on your own published area, I don't see why you wouldn't want to use it. Anything that makes sense to use that gets awareness about you and your product and your service, whether it's on LinkedIn or Medium, your own blog, or even Google Plus. You mentioned before I disappeared from Google Plus for a while. I've only recently come back and found more value in it, and I'm seeing the benefit of that in traffic to the blog. So it makes sense that I would be in Google Plus versus Facebook or Twitter or LinkedIn. I don't use it anywhere near. I post updates on it. That's it. I don't use LinkedIn. So I'm completely the wrong person to ask about that. But I know friends that have got traffic and solid leads from publishing on the LinkedIn platform because they have more followers and they're sharing the content that's published on LinkedIn, and that traffic is now coming back to the website. So it definitely works if it's right for your goals in business.
Excellent. And I think, again, that's another very pointed comment on choosing the right things which will work for you, playing to your strengths, being economic with your efforts in order to get the maximum return for the energy you're investing. That's a very good point. So with that, Dan, we're going into the sort of straight and narrow of the show now. And let's look at the social media scene. Now, it's an environment which is constantly evolving. We determined that essentially you can't go around bribing your audience or trying to get in touch with those who peddle their influence. But there's a constant evolution to this, and part of this is this very conversation. Essentially, we're in an environment which is transparent. We become very open about the dynamics involved, the tools we use, the impact, and the effects. So you can't say that we go in there with our eyes shut or wearing blinkers of any sort. So how do we then evolve in that environment? How do you see it a year from now, 2 years from now?
Social in general, or
social in terms of also marketing and the way we work in that respect.
I think a lot. I mean, I make assumptions every year for my own blog and what have you, and I'm wrong all the time, or 9 times out of 10. So anybody that's listening, just don't quote me on this next bit. But I see real micro communities like coming to the fore. You look on Facebook and it's not the public updates that are getting traction. It's the closed off groups that have got a shared interest. You look at Google Plus, and I know people like to come down on Google Plus being this ghost town. Tons of publications write about that, but we find that it's the communities and the private conversations that are driving huge amounts of interaction and huge amount of insights being shared from people you would never connect with. You go to the likes of Quora, I can never pronounce that right, Quora, you know which one it is.
It is Quora,
yeah, and I always used to look at that and think, what the heck is this? What's this all about? Now, the stuff that I can glean from there is it's just amazing, and it's been freely given, and it's people that know what they're talking about. You look at their bios, their history, their career path, and you think, wow. So I really strongly feel that social is like, going back to your point earlier about noise and huge amounts of amplification. Yeah, it's going to be very much focused now, which will make it harder for brands to get interjected into, because now you're talking about these closed, like these velvet rope walled gardens or whatever. You're talking about small communities that are very protective of who's in them, what messages are coming in, what outside influence they're letting in, and this is where it's going to force brands back to really talking and understanding. All right, I need to get in front of these 2,000 people that are in this amazing community. How do I do that? Who's my contact? Who's my in? And it's going to make brands work. It's going to make businesses work, which is great. It's no longer lazy marketing.
Don't you think there's a risk here of some brands or some marketing plans oversimplifying the approach, feeling the pressure, exactly the pressure which you explained, looking at their need to get into a community and thinking that the easiest way to do this is through their access point, an influencer of sorts? So then we're going back to square one, where they're thinking they need to target specific people in order to get through the gatekeeper and access a community. Don't you think there's a real risk of that, which will take us through the same cycle of mistakes and fixes and trials and errors that we've seen so far.
Yeah, and that will always be the case. I mean, it's even with doing influence marketing the right way, if you like, there will always be mistakes. You will always take a wrong path. You'll always connect with the wrong person who you thought was going to be the gatekeeper, and there might not even be a gatekeeper. That's the wrong approach for that community or for that audience you're going after, and which is where it comes back to data and real data, not being the fuzzy stuff that looks great on spreadsheets and accountants are really happy, but solid data that shows this community strongly believes in X, Y, Z, and you don't even have to approach that community directly. It's putting messaging out that subconsciously is hitting that community, whether it's on retargeting ads, something that's retargeting. The best market we know, I recall one of the comments from your update about this, and one of the comments asked about, well, the goal was to make sure the consumers they're not even aware they're being marketed to, but how easy is that? And it's not, it's like, it's damn near impossible, because if you see an ad, you know an ad. But I hope, and maybe this is like, being mean, but I hope that brands do fail, and I hope that brands do trip up, because that will force them to reevaluate how they're marketing and how they're doing business, and what their customer means to them. And it's why little guys like, disruptors like Uber, I hate the service, but I will admire what Uber did to the taxi service, because they offered something that people clearly wanted without having to go to a taxi influencer to get the message out. I don't know if there is a taxi influencer. That'd be an interesting influencer, actually. But you don't have to go direct. Is my point. It's smart marketing, it's smart thinking, and it's identifying what you need to do to get to where you need to be.
Right, and we have a message from Randy on this one.
Yeah, so Randy is in the audience. He did say thanks for the shout out. But he also said you could always stalk them in a nice way. I love that he added that caveat. Like, I stalked Danny Brown and David, and apparently I'm next.
But that's the thing, it's taken an interest. I mean, I'm wary of the word stalking, because I worked with a charity a while back that combats stalking in the US. I'm always, and that's no affront to Randy, I apologize if it is, I'm just wary of that word, but it's a true point. It's, you understand who you want to go after, so to speak, from audience point of view, and how can you do that? What's worked with other people trying to connect, or other brands? Why is your competitor succeeding where you're not with the demographic you're going after? And you study what they're doing, you study what they've messed up, and that's your in, so to speak, from a stalking point of view.
Okay, and there's a challenge to this now, Danny, because essentially everything you said, which makes perfect sense, and I'm all 100% behind it. And you talk about being real, and you're the example of that in how you conduct yourself. And you talked about how marketing campaigns need to move away from perceived targets, and they need to reach them, and need to move away from the spreadsheets and whatever they tell them in pretty colors. But the thing is, these are the things which in a corporate world drive marketing. These are the things which drive campaigns. If they set, for instance, the goal of hitting 1,000 people, and they don't, and hit 100, then they're going to view it as a failure regardless of the effect. If they, don't look at the numbers in the spreadsheet, the nice soft qualities, which are hugely important, they make all the difference, and the ones you actually focus on, are very hard to quantify in a spreadsheet, which means they're very hard to analyze, they're very hard to target perhaps in marketing, they're very hard to market for. So how do we square this circle? Because this seems to be at the heart of many of the disconnects we have between the traditional brand and the marketing that comes in now. So what would you suggest?
That's a great question, and it's a challenge. I mean, the company I work for has got 18,000 employees, so it's very much a huge, crazy-sized organization. It's got very different approaches for the audience sector that they're going after. But to give you an example, let's take Ford and GM, two huge competitors. They almost went down under about 5-6 years ago when the auto industry failed, and then they came back around and they took very different approaches to getting back on track. Ford lauded for their work that they did in social media. Scott Monty did a great job getting a whole bunch of influencers driving cars across the desert to blog about it, and there was a huge amount of social buzz, and Ford got some great awards for their social media campaigns. GM took a different approach. They were still on social, but half the audience sizes of the Ford's, Facebook and Twitters and YouTube, etc. Half the audience from, say, a social campaign, they focus more on, say, PPC and on the floor what GM meant to you as a GM customer. When you come into a GM showroom, we've got the guy that knows and lives and breathes GM, and I'm sure Ford is the same. I know friends that won't buy anything else but Ford because of the experience at a Ford showroom. What was interesting was, I think it was last year, beginning of last year, middle of last year, the results came out for Ford and GM, and despite all the buzz and the awareness and the numbers and the excellence that Ford rightly got for their social and their inbound marketing, they sold far less cars and far less profit and revenue than GM did, who went a more, we're going to understand what you're after, we're going to deliver it face to face, so to speak, we're going to give you that experience. And you don't have to look at spreadsheets to know that Ford did amazing things, sold less cars. And if you can't understand that a company like Ford is less successful than GM, even though they've got more numbers on the spreadsheet, you just need to look at the two car manufacturers and an arrow up here and an arrow down there for Ford and GM. I think if you're the CEO of Ford, you're looking at your social activity, you're thinking, what did we achieve with that? Did you get awareness? Great. Did that come in the bottom line? Not so much. So, I don't know if that's a good example or not, where you can make it a straightforward, clear-cut case for ignore the numbers, just look at the two important things: who sold the most cars and had the most revenue.
Awesome. And I think that sort of clarifies things. And we had a comment, I think, which came up on the stream. Alex?
Yes. So Juan Carlos Giraldo.
That's an awesome name.
I
love that name.
I really hope I got that last one right. Asks, there are layers of influence. What do you think, Danny? Do you agree with that?
Yeah, definitely. And it comes back to understanding where your customer is, or your blogger or whatever. But we always talk about the purchase life cycle because Sam and I, my co-author Sam Fiorella, we strongly believe that influence should always be a strong part of the sales, goals for companies. So it is understanding, okay, you've got layers of influence that say, I'm a dad. Does that mean I'm a dad blogger? Not necessarily. So why would you offer me diapers to review, for example? You've got people looking for a phone. Who impacts their influence? Is it their workers? Is it their colleagues? Is it their friends? And depending on what age group you're in, different people are going to influence your decision to buy that phone. You look at for example, the case study we used in the book that opens the book up, the first chapter, was about MV1 Canada, and they made the first custom-built mobility vehicle in North America. Instead of retrofitting existing vehicles for folks with disabilities, MV1 Canada, who's the offshoot of MV1 in America, custom-build the cars. It makes them safer, makes them more reliable, it makes them more economical in the long run. But they were going up against a very, very hard market to penetrate. And so initially we went after the clouds and the cred superstars and the social media superstars, got a great bit of buzz, some sales, but not a lot. So we looked at that, we debriefed, we looked at why the campaign failed, and we understood that while these guys might have a top tier of influence, they don't actually impact the person that needs the vehicle, whether that's the caregiver or the person with the car itself. So the next stage, we identify and a big part of it is what kind of disabilities a person got. Is it long-term, where they have different care needs, short-term, where it's more short-term care needs, and that impacts who's going to influence a person to buy the car. So it's a caregiver, it's a wife, it's a husband, it's a family doctor, it's a sports physiotherapist. Every single person's got a different layer of influence to that one person that's going to buy the MV1 vehicle. So yeah, there's very much different layers of influence depending on where you are at the decision-making point.
Okay, I think that's actually, again, reinforcing pretty much many of the things you said about following the path, understanding it in terms of the relationships involved and the contact points, as opposed to blindly following the logic of, and the assumed logic of a campaign. And we have another comment from the stream.
Yeah, I like this one. From Sergio Redondo. Pretty sure I got that one right. I understand how brands can benefit from influencers, but how can influencers benefit from their influence over others? I mean, what is their profit? Followers? Recognition? It's about an ego question. Don't know.
And that's a good question, Sergio. It's but I mean, if you think about it, what's the economy of any successful marketing campaign, whether it's on social or whatever? It's trust in a brand, it's trust in a product, it's trust in the person that's selling you or giving you advice. And if an influencer takes a completely unbiased approach to promoting a car, to promoting a new piece of technology, to promoting a camera, to promoting Vincent Messina's law firm, for example. Well, he's not a lawyer, is he? He's an accountant. And I don't know, whatever Vincent does, promote his company.
Yeah, he pretends.
But it comes down to taking an unbiased point of view and saying, okay, you know what? Yes, I've been paid or I've been sponsored for this content, this post, this ad, whatever way you want to look at it. But I'm going to give you the truth, and because I respect you as my audience, to want the truth about why you'd love this and why you really shouldn't buy it. And these are the reasons why you shouldn't buy it. And if you can build that up, you're going to become a more trusted resource, not only for the audience that you're trying to reach, but more brands are going to connect with you anyway, because they know that when you speak and review something, your audience actually listens to you, so they're going to want to work with you more, as opposed to someone who's just putting it in for the bucks at the end of the day. So there is profit there, but it's a relationship profit as well as financial profit, I think.
And again, I think it comes down to all these soft qualities which we tend to now bring to the core of many of the activities which we carry out within the outer wrapper of our technicalities. Okay, we're getting near the end now, so if I were to ask you to sum up what we've taken away from here, Danny, what would you say?
I would like to think that we're not going to use the R at the end of influence anymore, or much less. And I think it just comes back to, it's the age-old axiom of understanding your customer. What are they after, and what can you do to make that happen for them, and how do you make that happen? It's who you need to actually forget this superstar influencer. Think of it more as what is the pathway to that person. Is it a publication like ReadWrite? Is it a Google Hangout with yourself? Is it a blog post by David Kuchar? Is it an ad that you see? I bought, I can't remember what I bought now, but I saw an ad, like a builder's sign stuck in the front lawn in my neighbour's house. And I think it was actually steps. I need to get my steps repaired on my deck or something. I really can't remember, but I bought it because it was there at the right time, and it said, hey, and I could see what he was doing in my neighbour's yard. I was thinking, I trust this guy, he's not made a mess. It's as simple as that. It's like making sure that what you say you're going to deliver, you deliver, and people will buy that. I'd hope.
It's that simplicity, isn't it, which is exceptionally hard to get right. And the more things scale, the harder it is to actually maintain the kind of connection and immediacy. And you're right, it is a challenge. As we're getting the final question, really. So unless there's another comment from Alex, I will launch it. Alex, have you got anything else coming up?
No, the last question was to do a nice sum up, as a couple of people showed up late. So you already covered it.
Yeah, we did, yes. Okay, so here's the question finally. We talked about influencer and influence marketing, and obviously influence marketing is what we should be focusing on. There's going to be inevitably still a focus on influencers, and we're questioning what they do and why. Do you think there's a certain ego thing which maintains that culture and tends to feed onto itself?
I think in a way it's understandable, because once you start getting 20, 30, 40, 50,000 people following you and hanging on your every word, I think it can, play into an ego and make you believe you're something you're not, or maybe not so much that, but just make you less open to criticism. We had a great conversation last week about haters going to hate, and this whole mindset. And you tend to find that the higher up the social media ecosystem you go, the quicker that phrase is to get bandied about. And I think that's because people don't get challenged often enough, and when you do get challenged, you get pushed back on. So of course, as you start to get more traction on your blog subscribers, your Twitter followers, your Google Plus followers or whatever, and less people push back, it gives you that sort of God complex. And I do think that influencers, once they get to that stage, feel that, yes, I should be telling you I'm going to take $1,000 if you want to put an ad on my blog, versus, I'll work with you because I actually believe in your product, and I'll take a minimum amount and actually share it with my audience. But I do think a lot of
the kind of approach, the moment we have a slightly different approach to the economic relationship, don't you think it essentially taints the entire dynamic?
Yeah, and you know, I do think that a lot of the people that have an ego online must have a huge ego offline. Because I know a lot of people like to think that you can separate the two. You know, you can have your online persona and your offline persona. I have no idea what that is. It's like, how can you separate two? That's like saying, I'm going to go home in the evenings, kiss my wife, put my kids to bed, and in the morning I'm not going to go to work. I'm going to jump in a hotel with 3 hookers in Vegas and never tell anybody, because that's the kind of, you know, the split that I've got. I can't understand that. How can you continue to do that? Because at some point you're going to trip up. At some point you have to trip up. And I think that's where influencer campaigns or influencers or using influencers, they'll trip up because it'll come through that Tiger Woods doesn't drive a Buick, you know, and we are actually meant to believe that. So I do think that, you know, the good thing is influence marketing will move away from that, move away from the ego and focus solely on the business goals and what it means for consumer and influencer. So.
Awesome. That's really cool. Great. And we're coming up to the end of our show. Unless there's any more comments anywhere which we need to bring up, Alex?
No, not at this time.
Fabulous. And we're summing up then. Well, it's been a hell of a ride over the last 18 months and certainly the last almost 6 months with SEOWiSE. We've covered some phenomenal subjects. We had fantastic guests, not least of which is Danny Brown. And we've covered in different ways very much the same thing. Essentially, when it comes to anything, if you can't make the person-to-person relationship work at a very real level, then the likelihood of that working out long-term or effectively at any time is pretty slim. How you square that circle is, as Danny Brown said, in the execution rather than the plan. And you need to be able to understand what you're doing and try to do it as honestly and openly and transparently as possible. And with that, pretty much we wrap up the last of the SMT Power Talk series for social media today. I'd like to thank Danny Brown for being here today, Alex for doing a fabulous job, and the one who gets the least amount of recognition and does the most is John Ellis behind the camera, who actually makes all these things happen. Without him, you'd be looking at a blank screen and probably no sound. So, so bear that in mind. This is David Amerland saying goodbye.
Say goodbye, everybody.
Oh, goodbye, everybody. Sorry,
Awesome.
John.